It was supposed to be just a short vacation. Nothing fancy. Just 10 days off, up in the mountains, no phone, no emails, just fresh air and silence. I had everything planned out. Locked all the doors, set the alarms, even asked a neighbor to keep an eye on the place just in case. My HOA dues were fully paid. My yard was clean. No violations. No complaints. Everything was in order. Or at least, that's what I thought. 3 days in, I got a call from the hotel. A major storm was moving in. Roads could be blocked for days. They offered a refund for the last part of the trip. I figured, why not head home early and beat the traffic? I packed up, hit the road, and made it back in the early afternoon. Nothing seemed off until I turned into my neighborhood. There were cars everywhere, lined up on both sides of the street. Some people were carrying furniture. Others were standing around with drinks, chatting like it was some kind of garage sale party. I slowed down, confused. Whose house was hosting a sale? That's when I realized all those people weren't gathered around a house. They were gathered around my house. I pulled up to my driveway and froze. My car barely fit past a truck loaded with what looked like my dining table and chairs. A large hand-painted sign was staked into my lawn. Neighborhood estate auction, HOA authorized. What? My front door was wide open. Strangers were walking in and out like it was a public market. Some were carrying lamps. Someone rolled a speaker across the grass. My living room couch, my actual couch, was sitting halfway on the sidewalk with a sticky note that said /$50 or best offer. I jumped out of the car and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? This is my house." Some people paused. Others just kept browsing. And then I saw her, Karen, HOA president, clipboard in hand, loud as ever. She was standing by a folding table set up at the base of my porch, collecting cash and handing out receipts. She turned, looked right at me, and had the nerve to smile. "Oh, you're back early," she said like I'd shown up to my own surprise party. "What is going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen shrugged. "You abandoned your property. HOA guidelines allow us to secure and redistribute assets when there's evidence of neglect." Neglect? I nearly laughed. "I've been gone for 3 days. You knew I was on vacation." She smirked. "You never gave proper written notice." I was stunned. People were still walking through my home, touching my stuff. A man had my guitar in his hands. A kid was sitting on my porch swing, swinging like it was a park. I stepped forward to stop them, and that's when Karen pulled out her phone. She dialed and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Hello, yes, I need police. A trespasser is threatening neighbors and refusing to leave. Yes, the address is..." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was calling the cops. On me, for standing on my own porch. Someone nearby asked her if they should stop the auction. She waved them off. "No, everything's under control. We have legal authority. He doesn't even live here anymore." I pulled out my wallet and held up my ID. "This is my house. My name. My address. You want more proof?" Karen ignored me. At that moment, the crowd started to shift. Some people looked uncomfortable. A few backed away. One woman even asked if the auction was legit. Karen snapped at her, saying it was sanctioned by the HOA under emergency procedures. I stood in the middle of my lawn, stunned, watching strangers walk off with pieces of my life. My kitchenware, my tools, a framed picture of my dog. Gone like it all meant nothing. And in that chaos, I heard the sirens. They were coming. The flashing red and blue lights painted my street in chaos. Everyone froze. The so-called auction turned quiet, like someone had flipped a switch. People holding boxes stopped mid-step. One guy slowly put down a blender like it had suddenly become illegal to touch. 2 police cruisers rolled up and officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the crowd. Karen raised her hand, fast like a kid in school who knew the answer. "Officers! Over here! That's him! The man causing all the trouble." She pointed right at me. One of the officers approached, calm but firm. "Sir, can I ask what's going on here?" I took a breath. This is my home. I came back early from a trip and found my property being sold off by this woman and a bunch of strangers. I have ID. I live here. Everything here is mine. Karen cut in before he could respond. He's trespassing. The HOA has declared this house abandoned. We followed protocol. The board voted unanimously. It's all documented. The other officer joined in. Do you have any paperwork, ma'am? Proof of authority? Karen nodded and handed him a folder she had prepped, thick with printouts. Right here. Notices, photographs, warnings. He was gone, unreachable, no sign of return. We followed our bylaws to the letter. I watched as the officers flipped through her stack of papers. I knew those weren't real violations. Half of them were probably fabricated. The other half might have been old notices from last year that were already resolved. Then I showed my ID, driver's license with the correct address, recent utility bills from my phone. I even pulled out my phone and showed a time-stamped flight confirmation proving I'd only been gone for 3 days. One of the officers asked, "Do you have security cameras?" "Front and back," I said. He followed me to the side of the house where the external monitor was tucked into the wall. I showed him footage from the day I left. You could see me locking the door, walking to the car. Nothing suspicious. No signs of an emergency. Then, just 2 days later, Karen appeared on screen with 2 other board members, unlocking my gate, stepping inside like they owned the place. No police, no locksmith, just a single bolt cutter and some clipboards. When the officer saw that, he radioed for backup. Not for me, for them. Karen's expression began to crack. One of the officers walked over to her and asked, "Did you enter this property without a court order or police presence?" "It was authorized by the HOA," she insisted. "We don't need a court order. Section 4.9 of the guidelines clearly states that in cases of abandonment—" "Ma'am," he cut her off, "abandonment is a legal status, not something you declare just because someone missed a meeting." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The officer looked around at the crowd. "Everyone who took something from this home, that's now evidence. We'll need it returned immediately." People began slowly backing up. Some looked guilty. Others looked angry, not at me, but at Karen. A woman clutching a flower vase whispered. She said this was all cleared. "I paid cash for this." Karen turned red. "This is outrageous. You're all making a mistake. I was protecting the neighborhood. He was a ghost homeowner. Nobody saw him for days." I raised my voice just enough to be heard. "That's because I was on vacation. I even told one of your board members before I left. You ignored it, didn't you?" Karen's eyes darted. She was searching for someone to back her up, but none of the other board members came forward. One of them actually stepped back into the crowd, looking anywhere but at her. The officers moved in closer to her now. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for questioning." "What? Are you arresting me?" she barked. "Not yet, but we are opening an investigation into possible trespassing, theft, and property damage. You'll need to cooperate fully." She looked stunned, then furious. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I make the rules." One of the officers calmly replied, "Not above the law. You don't." And just like that, Karen, who had been standing tall on my porch like a queen, was led away, still muttering about bylaws and neighborhood authority. I stood there in the middle of the lawn, watching the crowd slowly break apart. Some people quietly returned items. Others just left without saying a word. A few neighbors came up to me and apologized, said they had no idea it was all fake, but the damage was done. After Karen was taken in for questioning, you'd think the whole mess would have ended there, but it was only the beginning. The deeper we looked, the more twisted everything became. That night, I stayed at a friend's house. I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning with questions. How did she do it? Why did nobody stop her? How could someone with no legal right stage a full-blown auction on private property in broad daylight? I knew Karen was bold, but this wasn't bold. This was criminal. The next morning, I met with my attorney. He was already reviewing the footage and the HOA's own charter. He raised an eyebrow when I told him she claimed the property was abandoned. According to HOA rules, A home is only considered abandoned if there's no contact with the owner for 90 days and utilities are shut off. I was gone for 3. The auction flyers were another story. We pulled up posts Karen had made online. She had listed abandoned houses on local Facebook groups, Craigslist, and even in the state sale app. Each post had bold letters, HOA approved auction. Everything must go, with my address front and center. But here's the kicker. She even used a fake business name, Karen's Community Clearouts LLC. She created it just a month before the auction. Not registered. No license. Just a name she printed on her flyers to make it look official. When the police searched her house, they found a binder. Inside were notes about my schedule, my lawn care service, my mail pickup dates, everything. She had been tracking my movements for months. There were emails she sent aboard full of made-up stories. She wrote things like, "There's mold in the siding. He hasn't mowed in weeks. Unpaid dues for 6 months." All completely false. But what really hit me was this. A printed email from an HOA board member sent to Karen just days before I left. It clearly said, "He's going on vacation. Already told me. Property's fine. No action needed." Karen had ignored it, flat out pretended it never existed. The board claimed they didn't know she'd take it this far. Most of them said they'd signed off on routine welfare checks, not a full auction. One member told me Karen said I had been hospitalized and that my family had abandoned the house. She even said I told her, personally, to sell the furniture to cover unpaid fines. It was all lies, layer after layer of lies. Meanwhile, neighbors were coming out of the woodwork. A man from 3 houses down knocked on my door with a box. Inside were a few of my books, some photo frames, and a collectible watch I thought was gone. He said, "I bought this stuff because Karen told us it was legit. I'm sorry, man. I had no idea." I thanked him. He wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 days, people returned everything from throw pillows to antique tools. But some items, my grandfather's old rifle, my signed guitar, a couple electronics, were long gone. Karen had sold them off early, probably under the table, to buyers who were now nowhere to be found. My lawyer filed a restraining order immediately. Karen wasn't allowed within 300 feet of my property. And more than that, we filed civil charges. Not just for the theft, but for trespassing, invasion of privacy, slander, and emotional distress. The police began gathering statements. They interviewed the board. They collected screenshots, flyers, messages. Even the locksmith Karen used came forward, saying she claimed to be acting under emergency HOA authority to get him to open the door. But here's the strange thing. Karen wasn't panicking. She wasn't apologizing. She was doubling down. In an interview with a local reporter, she said, "I did what I had to do. He abandoned the neighborhood. We don't need people like that here." The arrogance was unreal. She acted like I had committed a crime just by leaving town, like the whole neighborhood belonged to her, and the HOA gave her royal permission to do whatever she wanted. But what she didn't realize was this. Now, everyone was watching. The board, the police, the news, and most of all, me. And I wasn't going to let it slide. The media picked up the story faster than I expected. By the end of that week, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Local news vans started camping out near the entrance to our neighborhood. One reporter even knocked on my door, asking, "How does it feel to have your house auctioned off by your own HOA president?" Honestly, I didn't even know how to answer. Half of me was still angry, the other half just numb. It felt like I was stuck in some kind of twisted reality show. My private life, my home, my stuff, turned into a public scandal. Karen, of course, loved the attention. She strutted around like a celebrity, gave interviews, wore big sunglasses like she was being hounded by paparazzi. She even held a press conference in front of the HOA office, claiming she had acted with integrity and followed community guidelines for the good of the neighborhood. It was surreal, like she truly believed she was a victim. But then came the cracks. One of the board members finally broke their silence on social media. They posted a long message, admitting they were manipulated. They said Karen had lied about my absence, fake complaints, and pushed the board into believing I had left town for good. According to them, Karen bullied anyone who disagreed. She runs this HOA like a kingdom, the post said, and anyone who questions her gets targeted. More neighbors started sharing their own stories. Turns out, I wasn't her first victim. One guy had been fined $200 for planting the wrong color flowers. Another woman had her fence torn down because Karen claimed it was too high, even though it met city code. One elderly couple said Karen used to walk past their house every week just to peek through the window and check for safety violations. But auctioning someone's entire house? That crossed every line. I started going through the mess Karen had left behind. My living room looked like a half-finished jigsaw puzzle. Some furniture was returned, but most of it was scratched or missing legs. My garage, once neat and labeled, now looked like a tornado had passed through. My TV was gone. My desktop computer, where I stored all my personal documents and photos, was gone too. Some of it might have been backed up, but not everything. There were footprints in my bedroom, drawers ransacked. Even my clothes had been thrown around like they were part of a clearance bin. Strangers had walked through every inch of my house, opened everything, touched everything. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal. And Karen? She kept digging her own hole. A few days after the board member's public statement, someone leaked the HOA's group chat logs. Screenshots showed Karen mocking my absence, saying things like, "We'll have this place cleared out before he even realizes." She even laughed about the auction in real time, writing, "One woman offered $10 for his TV. Might as well give it to her. He's not coming back." Those messages spread like wildfire. People who once supported her started backing away. Some of the buyers who had picked up furniture started dropping it off anonymously. One guy returned my gaming console wrapped in a trash bag, left on the front step like a stolen cat. Another woman brought back a box of kitchenware and said softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was stolen." Meanwhile, the police were building their case, not just on the auction, but on the HOA's internal corruption. Apparently, Karen had misused funds before, took HOA dues to hire her nephew for fake landscaping services, billed the community for a fence only built halfway, and ordered security patrol for her street only, leaving the rest of us on our own. My lawyer filed a civil suit, but now the district attorney was considering criminal charges too. Fraud, embezzlement, burglary, harassment. It was no longer just about a crazy woman overstepping her role. It was about someone abusing power for years and finally being caught. The neighborhood changed overnight. The board held an emergency vote. Karen was officially removed from her position, but even that didn't stop her. She claimed it was illegal, that the board had no right to remove her, and she was still the rightful president. She filed a motion to block the vote, filed another one to stop the lawsuit. Her lawyer even threatened to sue me for defamation. But the evidence was stacked against her now. She wasn't the queen of the neighborhood anymore. She was a scandal. The legal wheels began to turn faster than anyone expected. By now, Karen wasn't just a neighborhood problem. She was becoming a full-blown case study in abuse of power. When my civil suit hit the courthouse, it didn't arrive alone. 5 other neighbors filed their own lawsuits the same week. It was like a dam had finally burst. People were tired of pretending, tired of fearing HOA retaliation, and definitely tired of Karen. Each lawsuit told a different part of the same story. One man claimed Karen fined him $300 for having excessively loud wind chimes. Another woman had photos showing Karen trespassing into her backyard to inspect flower beds. A young couple said their welcome sign was removed 3 times, each time followed by a note from Karen saying it didn't meet aesthetic standards. And all of it, every strange rule, every power move, traced back to one person. We found out she had rewritten sections of the HOA bylaws over the years. Not legally, of course. She just edited the digital documents and told the board it was approved language. And because nobody double-checked, it passed without debate. No vote, no homeowner input, just Karen's word and a signature stamp she'd made herself. The icing on the cake? Karen wasn't even the original HOA president. She had taken over after the last one suddenly resigned. The same man who later emailed our legal team saying, "I left because I couldn't deal with her harassment anymore." When the judge got her first look at all this, she ordered a full review of HOA operations, banking records, and communications. My attorney and I sat in a room packed with folders and files. What we found there was mind-blowing. Karen had spent thousands of HOA dollars on things that had nothing to do with the neighborhood. Spa appointments, gift baskets, restaurant bills, even a subscription to a luxury wine club. When questioned about it, she claimed they were gifts for volunteers and bore morale boosters. The receipts, however, all had her name on them, and some even listed her home address. Back at the house, repairs had begun. I had a locksmith reinstall every door. Security cameras were upgraded. The living room was still half empty, but it was mine again. Friends helped repaint walls. My cousin even brought over a recliner from his garage, just so I had a place to sit that wasn't filled with bad memories. It didn't match anything, but I didn't care. At least it hadn't been stolen. Neighbors started dropping by more often, not out of pity, but because things were finally changing. For the first time in years, people felt free to talk. One elderly neighbor baked me a pie and said, "I never liked her, but we all just thought it was easier to stay quiet." Karen, meanwhile, refused to back down. She walked through the neighborhood like she still ruled it, even though she'd been stripped of all authority. Her front yard was now surrounded by cameras she had installed herself, as if she expected retaliation. One afternoon, she shouted across the street at a teenager riding his bike, accusing him of staring at her home for too long. Police visited her house again after she allegedly confronted a neighbor who had returned a borrowed ladder. The neighbor said Karen demanded proof it was theirs, even though their name was written on it in big, black marker. The officers gave her another warning. That made 3. But what really sealed things was a letter sent from the county clerk's office. They had launched their own investigation after our legal team flagged potential forgery. Apparently, Karen had submitted documents under HOA letterhead to apply for permits she wasn't authorized to file. She claimed she was acting on behalf of the community, but she never asked for anyone's permission. The HOA, now under temporary oversight, held a public meeting. It was packed. Homeowners filled every chair, stood along the back wall, even spilled out into the hallway. People read statements, shared stories, and some even cried while explaining what they had been through under Karen's rule. And finally, someone stood up and asked a question no one had dared before. How did we let this happen for so long? That silence that followed, it was louder than any speech. Everyone was realizing the same thing. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. This was about the way power, if left unchecked, turns a neighborhood into a nightmare.